Oh, boy.
Hey, Tada, how's it?
No. All is well, all is well. Sizwe again.
No, konke right, brother.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Sibuyile.
Sibuyile futhi mfowethu.
No. Kuba njalo.
Yeah, right,
Hayi.
wena bro wami.
No. No complaints. Uyazi masivukile thina ekuseni. The rest sikubona ngendlela.
Uyisosha mfati.
Ayikho enye indlela. It's the only way. He can't call for it.
No, true.
Yeah, and namuhla at least u-Eskom uyasihlonipha usinikile ukukhanya so asihlele emotweni.
Last week was a bit of a problem, but this
Yeah.
week
Yeah, no, but we turned it around nevertheless. So at least we kept on and we did what we were supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, we started 7 minutes later than we should have last week.
Yeah.
But and we lost a few people, but I think they came back. But we're back today, so it doesn't matter. Well, last week
Yeah, boy. And
yeah,
and it was a conversation and a half. I think I said with Nakon would say it was more than I had bargained for now, and that was a good thing. No, but I expected a certain level, and then those expectations were superseded, which is why Nakon scored again more, because as soon as that conversation became available on IGTV and we put it up on YouTube, the conversations that it sparked from Abantu Besilisa and Abantu Besifazane, I found amazing. But I expected it more from Abantu Besifazane because usually that's who follows up and that's who has the conversation. Abantu Besilisa are usually very conservative, but this time around, bengithola my voice notes, my text. I'm like, okay, so at least we caught in their court, So I felt I was very glad when the opportunity came to see and the because I saw what this is actually touching something, and it's on you. You gave this one. You gave us masculinity, and hey. Yeah, around we keep saying it, but it's a giant. It's a giant because I think it's at the center of yonke into eyenzakalayo, especially manje. Our perception of it, how we understand ourselves, indlela esiyiphatha ngayo, indlela esiyibuka ngayo, as abantu besilisa, as amadoda, as abafana, and whatever you want to call them. I think masculinity and the understanding of masculinity is at the center of all of it. So when you said, I was like, okay, I'm sure we'll lose. But I was like, okay, no, I'm never one to shy away from a challenge. So we are here.
But yeah. You know what, Ndie, maybe let me just start here so that we don't lose time. We have an hour and we've spoke for about 5 minutes, which is good, I guess, to lay some good foundation. But I think stemming from our conversation last week, Ndie, and from the comments that came through from the viewers who were here with us, and some of the comments, I guess, from Abantu Nami who commented on the little clips that I posted, Lawa, that you cut, the nuggets, it was quite apparent that there's a need for even greater conversations like this, And I just posted something now on Instagram, not on WhatsApp, and I said, these are conversations by men, about men, by men, but for everyone, because the story is always told by a woman on behalf of men. And as we speak, I'm very conscious that we don't represent the entire male species, as it were, but the disclaimer that I put last week, which I'll continue to put again this week, is to say, we speak from our own experiences and from our own research and from our own life, and in our engagement with people. We don't speak from an expert perspective, but I think the more raw it is in how we are doing it is the more real it is, because that's what people are more are more attuned with, you know. So after that conversation last week, maybe just to lay a bit more background and way forward of what's to come, we then said we are going to do a series of discussions, you know, and Ndie and I aptly titled the series the New Man, you know. So what is the new man? And we'll wrap that up on the 30th of September, which will be the last week. So when we consolidate all of these things, when we spoke about who broke the black boy or what broke the black boy, the masculinity conversation today, and those that are to come in the 3 weeks. So without spoiling, let me not take that away. So we've decided, that's what we'll do. And I conceptualized today's one, and he conceptualized the next two, and then I conceptualized the last one. So it's a good mix, you know. So with that said, Ndie, I think let's get straight into it, my brother, you know. When we speak about it, it's a very difficult one. I'm not naive to that fact, but
right.
So this platform, for those who are here with us and for those who may consume this afterwards, has been made possible by Ndie. And these videos, as he said, are on Instagram Live, on his IGTV, as well as on YouTube. So we'll share the links afterwards. But let's get into it, Ndie. I mean, there's two main topics that we're going to discuss, which is masculinity and emasculation.
Yes.
A very tough one, you know, but nonetheless, let's tackle it. Let's tackle it, you know, let's get into it.
I think it's tough, but I find myself realizing in most spaces, we don't understand what masculinity is. We understand the distorted idea of what it is, but not what it actually is. And with that being said, I think there's a huge misunderstanding. I mean, if you're a male and you have no understanding of masculinity, identity and self-image is already distorted. So I think we're at a place where we have a distorted image or an idea or perception of masculinity, which then informs how we move around in society, in the world. So what is it? Let me I have my own definition idea card, but I'm what is define it?
So I think, as the word suggests, masculinity, you know, it's amandla, you know. So when I speak about amandla, the general perception is that men are masculine, right? And it's not even a perception. Men are masculine, right, by nature. So by extension, then the behaviors or the social construct of what masculinity has been pinned onto men. So your question then says, what is masculinity? You know, it's a set of, I guess, attributes or characteristics that are put onto men to say that as a man, this is how you must behave. As a man, this is what is expected of you. As a man, these are the roles that you have to play. That is what masculinity is. It's a set of rules that are set by an environment that one would grow up in, which defines how one must behave, you know, either from childhood or as you grow or different levels of your life. That masculinity is defined as you grow up, you know, and it indicates these behaviors. I mean, it influences rather the behaviors that you exude as a man, you know. So long and short of it, I mean, I'll unpack it further, but that's the most general definition that I can think of masculinity, which on the other hand, the other acronyms are called is manhood and is manliness, you know. So that's masculinity. So that's let's say the top line, but we'll just go down a little bit into that conversation or into that definition.
Yeah. No, I'm with you in Uguti. It basically outlines generally what a man is supposed to be or what a man is. It began when I realized the bulk of the identity here too, whether given to us by society or just men defining themselves, has been largely on the physical side, on what you actually provide and what you are capable of doing with your hands, with your physical being, as opposed to encompassing spirituality, emotional intelligence, mentality yomuntu. So I find us in a space, man, where a lot of our guys and our peers are under the impression that bayindoda because unemali, uyindoda because unomsebenzi othize, uyindoda because unemoto, and so on and so forth, rather than considering a man's mental capacity, emotional stability and wellness, and level of spirituality. Masculinity has for the long span been defined by the physical element, which I think is a danger because those are external factors.
You know, Ndie, in saying that I don't put any blame on men for defining masculinity like that, because from time immemorial, that is how masculinity has been defined. Masculinity has been defined by one's strength, by one's courage, by a man's strength, by a man's courage, a man's independence, a man's assertiveness, a man's leadership. You know, those are the things that have defined a man. You know, so those elements that we discussed last week that you are bringing up, Konamanje, are I guess new things that are now to add to this masculinity. But the question says, to what extent are men attuned to move to that line of modifying the definition of masculinity? Because it calls for a change, and which is what we said last week. I think you'd remember when we spoke about a shift, you know, and some of the people said it starts with yourself, you know. But the broader definition of society adds to those things, which I have said as well, and also a time immemorial, even till now, in certain settings, a man's devotion to work, a man's ability to work, whether ngezandla or in him excelling in certain disciplines, you know, being able to provide for his family, those are even more definitions of masculinity, you know. And unfortunately, and this will go to the next 2 points, which will talk about toxic masculinity as well as emasculation. Those things, as it is, those are the things that define a man. Those are the things that, according to how we know a man, manhood, manliness should be, that's what is expected of a man. But the question then is it still true? You know, that can be a question for today or another day. But from that, what are men then facing today as a result of those expectations and those definitions that are ancient and maybe not so relevant at this point in time or at this day and age? So that's that concept is what we are battling with right now as men. That's the concept that we are battling with in this masculinity, in the understanding of this masculinity, as it were.
Again, the concern is, I feel our understanding of again, I was saying earlier on, we have a distorted idea of what it is the definition we have is not holistic. It's a fraction of what an individual or a man is. But Tina, we adopted it as though it's in its entirety what a man is supposed to be. So anything beyond that limited definition, we're unfamiliar with and we reject. So mainly, I say this because I believe, this is my view, Zuguti, men have I think the term is external locus of identity, which is
yes.
Food. We define ourselves by the externals, what we can put on the table, what is around us, whether it's the woman that we sleep with, it's the wife that we have, it's the children that we have, the positions in society that we occupy. Our identity is rooted in the external, not in the internal. And so I think there's a danger, Ngoba, one doesn't understand oneself. And if it's all external, you don't influence that. So if we take Izinto that, bluntly put, I'll say, if we look at elements like vulnerability, pain, fear, insecurities, doubt, self-consciousness, these are all human emotions, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity. These are human emotions. However, there are certain emotions that a man is not allowed to experience and feel, let alone express. So, uma sikhuluma ngendoda, a man is allowed to feel disrespected. He's allowed to feel angry. He's allowed to be pissed off. A man is not allowed to be scared. A man is not allowed to be self-conscious. A man is not allowed to be vulnerable and weak. So now what we've done with this distorted idea of masculinity, we've created an environment where you are a black man before you are human, which is not a safe place for anyone to exist. And that's why the understanding yet of masculinity is so distorted, Ngoba. It's a danger and a threat to all of us, everyone, men and women included. I think his signal is breaking. I'm not sure if I'm coming through. Okay.
Ndie, I'm losing you.
Yeah. No, you froze for a second, but you're back, Manj.
Sure, I lost you too there.
Yeah, but
okay.
but basically, I was saying our understanding of this slanted or inaccurate masculinity is a cancer to our society, to our culture, to everyone. Everyone.
So the what you are saying and what Ndie Nqobani is saying here is that she's agreeing with us to say that this definition is not holistic, and in us going through this definition, which leads to the other things that we'll talk about, why you feel emasculated because of one's keenness or one's marriage or one's thorough understanding of this definition without understanding the other things, and why you then become toxic in your masculinity. It's because it's this definition that holds true. It's this definition that holds true, and with this definition holding true in the heads of many people, and not considering what Uvezi is saying, Ndie Nqobani is saying, and what Umasintle is saying here, that's saying that the definition changes. It can't be a fixed definition, and it changes all the time. Without us realizing that, we'll always be held on to this definition. We'll always be, and that's that's why me and you are having these conversations. That's why some people are frowning upon, not frowning, but shocked. Are you guys able to have these conversations as men? Because we are now taking away from that benefit that I think one of the viewers last week said, in doing these things, it means you are now shaking the fundamental base that you as men have, because you're now taking it away. And by taking that away, it's changing that definition of masculinity and realizing Uguti, what was is no longer is now. And it's that scary realization, that man evolves, as the comment reads, that with the changing environment, man is evolving. If we fail to do that, then we'll hold on to this narrow definition of masculinity, and it leads on to these things that we are now going to go into, in a little short while, around then, what then is toxic masculinity, etc., etc. But there's one element that I want to bring, to say, at what point, and we spoke about this again last week, to say at what point then does one get fed this definition or this narrow idea of masculinity which they carry, which says, as you have put it, Kamnand, I love it, how much money do I have? How many girls do I sleep with? Who the type of woman I marry? The beauty of the woman or the looks of the woman, because that also hypes up a man and etc. When is that formed? What causes us to be like that? Because that is what we need to go and tackle, at least for the coming generations. So Ndie says it's societal perceptions, that define, those kind of the way that we define our masculinity. Me and you, I can tell you for free that the day we have sons, we will teach them masculinity in a different way. I've seen friends of mine who have taught their sons masculinity in a different way to how they probably would have been brought up. But it's at the genesis of their lives, at least I would like to believe. And I know I'm obsessed with the genesis. Last week I but it is that, Hey?
It's where that key is. And
correct.
I'm a believer in the power of visuals. This is what we grew up seeing. We grew up seeing amadoda ahamba ngemoto enkulu being respected more. We grew up seeing men with money being revered more. We grew up seeing men being appreciated and in protected by other men when they dabbled with multiple sexual partners or multiple women. You know, we've seen men being hailed for having the most beautiful girl in town or in the area, and so on and so forth. So these are things that we grew up seeing, and so they formed our idea of what a man is and what a man should go into. Now, the problem is.
No, go ahead, please. No, go ahead.
So the problem is, having grown up seeing that, we've never challenged or questioned, because we've never seen an alternative. We haven't seen the other side. So, I often say for and believe, Wuti, this generation is the first of many things. A lot of things are coming to light with this generation. A lot of cultural traumas and pains are being broken with this generation. This is the first for Ndie that we didn't get growing up, but we're now realizing, Wuti, wait, these things are actually not to our advantage. These things are actually detrimental. So I think masculinity is one of those, because even manje, with these conversations that we have, I can go back to my old neighborhood, and there's a huge detachment between me and the men over there, because the school of thought I'm in now and the way they perceive and move is so different, and I would be tagged as an outcast or a different kind of, or less than man, let me rather put, simply because of my viewpoint and the way I move and the way I treat people. So there's still that friction and that challenge that you have, even if that the new mindset. You go back home and why are you washing dishes when you're married? Why are you cleaning the house when you have a wife? That's a woman's job, you know. And so you actively have to face this reality, and you can see that duality between these two different understandings of masculinity. And so we fight our way through those subtle things. When we say, okay, no, that's not a masculine thing back home. At home, you don't. You don't. You just you play your part. Your wife does that, and this and this, and so it's distorted. It simply put, it's distorted.
This comment that you are putting now, this point you are making talks to this comment as well, Uguti. And I love the ownership then, because the bulk of this, it may come from men themselves, but there's also an expectation from women for men to be a certain way. And this comment comes from a woman, and I like it because it says that when we as a people come to realize that masculinity is ever changing, and it's from a woman, by the way, we'll find ourselves in spaces that don't force men to be a certain way. So it's saying that those who have that expectation on men, if they come to realize it, then they will free the men from that, and hoping by extension that men will free themselves. But Terence as well also says that, unfortunately, and it really is unfortunately, with Ndie agreeing to him, to say that it's all inherent. It's how we grow up. It's what we know. And that's where the inherency of this masculinity comes in, to say that this is how it must be. And that's what we're trying to break now with this conversation. And I guess future conversations along the lines of this, So long and short of it, I think we have broadly defined and we have tried to accommodate all the other things that have got to do with masculinity. This is a big topic. It's a big topic. We can't do it in an hour.
No, it isn't. But even at the same time, I feel it's impractical. I think if we take the logical mind and you sit down with yourself and we Google and the explanation here and define or see how masculinity is supposed to be as we've adopted, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to assume or to think or expect any human being to operate from a place of complete strength all the time. It makes no sense to expect any man to have the answers all the time, to be strong all the time, to be assertive all the time, especially when there's this lingering expectation to always be that, and at the same time the expectation that you are not allowed to express frustration from being in those situations. So the bigger danger, you know, I'm seeing Umbuso. I have to go with masculinity cannot have a fixed definition. For me, masculinity has now different characteristics. Then, yeah, that's
what
true.
it was.
It does evolve. Uli in the pretty enlightening us, we're really detaching from the true fundamentals of our existence. This is true, and I like that word existence. Ngoba masculinity, as we understand and see it, is irrelevant to humanity. It doesn't connect with it, again, that's why I was saying you are a black man and then you are human. So there are certain things that a black man cannot do, but humans can do. So in terms of, you know, emotions and the spaces you occupy, and not having outlets, because I've met women who say, "Ufuna indoda emadoda," and a male and a man who's assertive and all of these things. And I was like, okay, cool. But that cannot be one human all the time. Even an alpha male cannot be an alpha male all the time. And there's a danger which connects to everything that we're seeing now, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it's men leaving their families and going outward and doing all these kind of funky things. Because when you don't have an outlet for the things that you are feeling, when you don't have an environment that makes you safe and comfortable to express yourself without judging or belittling you, that's a dangerous place to be. And again, we touched on it last week. When you don't have those healthy outlets, you resort to unhealthy outlets, and those lead to damage, not only to self, but to those around you. So I think a lot of men are existing under the frustration of not being able to express themselves and feel safe. So a lot of men we feel everything. God, again, it's taboo for you to say certain things. It's taboo for you to act in certain ways. And so you protect your masculinity by pretending you didn't feel it and it didn't affect you, and that's not how you're seeing things, which makes no sense.
So the negative, I mean, with all this said, you know, the negative side, you know, of the application of the narrow definition of masculinity, we acknowledge that it has to change, because the popular narrative that is there all the time says that men must be whatever they are, and in that failure, then a man holding himself to that, then there becomes toxic masculinity, and that will be the second point of discussion right now. And maybe before I go to that second point of discussion, so we don't lose this comment, again, it says it's easy to live above the traditional definition of masculinity in a relationship, but the problem comes when the elders don't have an appreciation of the evolved relationship that you have with your partner, you know. So it's those traditional norms that Ndie spoke about and said that we have to live above the fundamentals. We're breaking those fundamentals and those traditions, and it concurs with what this comment Gamasinhle is saying as well, that when you still have those primitive parents or those primitive people that you are with who still have that expectation of how things should be, you know, and I guess that's when toxic masculinity then gets born from emadodeni, you know, because you say, I have to hold this masculinity at whatever cost, and then it then becomes negative and it becomes toxic, you know. Then it becomes toxic, and then the question then says, what then is that toxic? Because siyabuzwa every time, and I'll use this term in the absence of another one, subtle one to use, toxic, not toxic, sorry, feminists have been driving this toxic masculinity, misogyny, and all these other terms that they've been putting up, you know. So maybe let's just try and look at toxic masculinity, the concept of toxic masculinity, you know. I mean, by definition, one can say, good, it's the opposite of masculinity, or rather, it's maybe overbearing, not even the opposite, but overbearing, that supposed strength that the narrow definition of masculinity says, you know, and having that then leads you to become toxic, you know, and I know that as well is very, very broad. And what is it that happens then when a man displays that toxic masculinity? And it's so unfortunate that the outlet and the outlet, not in the one that you spoke about, where one will go and are your keeper, but the outlet of your toxic masculinity is is at most times, not all the times, is mainly on women by men. You know, it's mainly on women, and that's the truth. You know, it could be driven by the pressures that are held by the definition of masculinity as defined in that narrow definition. And in my failures, then I will then find an outlet, albeit in a negative sense, to take it out. And the casualty is women, is your children, and those around you. So that is toxic from my end. You know, toxic masculinity. You know, the misogyny that men, and I'll say we as men because I'm a man as well. Then we push out there. You know, for women. I mean, to disenfranchise women and use our masculinity to try to be above women simply because of how we understand this masculinity to be, and then it just causes this whole friction, you know, and that's the toxic part of this masculinity that we've just discussed.
And it's inevitable. It's supposed to be toxic. Go back again, as we were saying, our understanding and definition of masculinity is inhuman and impractical, and so when it's so dependent on external factors, the external factors will deny and reject this idea that we have. As we're seeing, Jeramanch, women are declining and rejecting this idea of your place is in the kitchen, I am the man, and my word goes. Our society is declining, Leondole, and because that's where we put our identity, when they deny that idea, we feel as though they are denying us as people. And that now poses a threat to when, as Mudwislis. So when a woman says, no, my place is not in the kitchen, I work. And when a woman says, no, you don't control me, I'll come and go as I please, you feel that as an attack on you. In the same way that when a woman leaves, what is the community going to say? I'm going to look like a failure. I'm going to look like less than because she left me. Ngoba, the identity for so long has been based on once you get a wife, you will become a man. So when a wife to leave, to you, she's threatening to take your masculinity and your identity in society away. And so Umuntu Slisa would see that as a threat rather than her choice to leave, you know. Sure. And Nage or Neg, sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I think survival of the strongest is at play. We all grow as sensitive boys who unfortunately are then led by bad influences that pressure you to harden up or mum yourself somewhat. Yeah. So what happens in houses or environments where men are traditional masculine or feminine? What happens in houses and environments where men are?
So it's a question. It's a question. So maybe.
You want to take?
Yeah. Look, I mean, the question for those who may not see it, it's further up. This person says, what happens in houses or environments where men are the traditional masculine men with feminist women? For my interpretation of this is that it's a recipe for disaster, because this one is pushing his side and this one is pushing her side, and you know, and I guess it's just a question of, and I put a disclaimer again, this is no professional advice, but this is just from our perspective as Ndie Nqobani. I mean, what happens, that's what happens, but how do you get over it, I guess, is the thing that one has to ask. I mean, you have to discuss, you have to talk it out. That's what I can think of, you know, because obviously, I mean, you know, that's what's going to happen, you know. And if women, I'm sorry, this is my closing point before we go to the last point. Our time just goes so fast. We have 23 minutes to go, and we still need to discuss emasculation. The follow-up question to that one says, Nandi, in 2020, does masculinity take into consideration the feminist woman? This is a response from me, right? The feminist woman, if the person becomes a feminist, decides to become a feminist simply with the idea of opposing masculinity, and they will always see everything as an attack on her as a female, because at most times, and in me listening to a lot of women who are feminists, but we're not going to allow this from men, we're not going to allow this, and sometimes some of it just boggles my logic when some of the feminists, just even logical things, you know. So the question is, to what extent, what is feminism, you know? And that's maybe a conversation that women can have and maybe empower us. But my understanding of it and how I've seen my feminists pushing it, it's always pushing against men, pushing against men. So when this question is a masculine man and a feminist woman, I don't know if it presupposes that it's that woman who will push against this man and this man who will push against this woman. So it's a very loaded question, which I don't know if we can unpack it fully here with the time that we have left. And it's not an area that one went into in preparation for today, at least from my side.
Yeah, I think when the question about traditional masculinity, what happens in that home or in that environment, I think we're kind of already seeing what's happening.
Sure.
I think the oppression of women, the amount of cases that's coming to light in terms of abuse, murder, rape, oppression in various kinds, I think that alone is the answer to that question. We're now seeing what's happening in those environments where umuntu wesilisa would harbor those traditional primitive views and confine umuntu wesifazane to a certain corner in the house. So I could, but I don't think I have to. I think it's self-evident. I think the reason why we're having the conversation is because we're now seeing the dangers of that. Masculinity in 2020. Well, that's where we're trying to go as a gender, as a society. I think we're putting an effort to try and get to that point where we actually see women beyond how we were raised to see women, beyond the confines of a kitchen and childbearing. I think in my mind, I could easily say, yes, the modern day or the new definition of masculinity sees women and empowers women and respects women and honors women and celebrates them. However, as a society, I don't think we are there yet. I would love for us to be there, but I think we are trying to get to a point where a woman is a full human being. She's not a second-tier citizen or being to men. I think we're trying to get to a point where a woman is free and safe and liberated enough to be and exist as whoever, whatever she feels, without feeling like, you know, you're stepping out of place or you're out of pocket. So I do think, in my mind, a new definition of masculinity has to take into account the feminine energy in its entirety, without us defining, we would see this is a woman and this is not. No, because we've done that in the past. We've told women what a good woman is, what wife material is. So I think the time now is for Abantu besilisa to kind of shut up, if we may, let women define themselves. Because we've never wanted or felt comfortable when women tell us who they are. We've always wanted to be, no. That's a good woman. A good woman is A, B, and C. And so in 2020, masculinity understands, I don't have to impose my views on you to be a man. Define yourself. Be who you are. If we can coexist and work together, sharp. If we can't, then, you know, we part ways and you find someone else who you can work with.
You know, let's I mean, with the remaining 18 minutes, a follow through and a logical follow through to this conversation is one of emasculation. You know, because that strong, forceful, at least from my understanding, force of feminism and that strong, forceful energy of feminism, not by what people have said here. And I saw some comments saying that the feminism is a woman trying to fight to get back her power, you know, to get back her position. And that is what we, as the men who are talking right now, are trying to do, to say, we understand that how things have been done are not the right way. So in essence, we are two sides of the same coin, you know, just coming to it in a different way. But while the narrow definition and the narrow understanding of this still exists, the emasculation of men will always then be a problem, you know, and we need to, I guess, define what that emasculation is, you know, so that we can be clear what we are talking about and where we are going to. And I've prepared quite a few things about this one, and I regret why I gave it less time, the emasculation. But it's a logical follow through to this. Just, you know, emasculation by itself, I think not even I think, physiologically, you know, it's the literal removal of the penis and the testicles of a man, right? So that's emasculation. So once you do that, you have emasculated a man. But in the times of now, in the context of now, it refers to, it's when a man is rendered useless, right? So that's emasculation, right? So why then is rendering a man useless and linking it to the removal of genitals referred to as emasculation? Or why is the rendering of a man useless or less masculine linked to the removal of testicles? It's simple. Amadoda, and this is the truth. A man's strength, at least primary strength, comes from the strength of his manhood. So, and his manhood is it Ozaki Zanga says. So once that is removed, once he's emasculated, then so I guess that's the literal sense, you know. That's the literal sense of it, you know, so of where emasculation comes from, right? So then, so I then say, when then it says, okay, if a man feels less of a man, what exactly is it, you know, that makes men feel emasculated? And I'm just going to make this comment and then I'll put it back to you, you know. It's when the man's biggest asset is his ego. When his ego is taken and it makes him feel less of a man for the reasons that we'll discuss as I go down, he's emasculated.
Yeah.
So that's when the man feels emasculated. That's when he feels his testicles and his penises is cut.
Yes, sir.
Right. So I'm bringing it back to you, my brother.
I only laugh and go, but I find it so funny how as males, as men, as boys, we are so quick to go to feeling emasculated.
Yeah.
We're so on standby for that. A woman will do something that a woman will turn you down for dinner because she's not in the mood, she's busy, she's not interested, whatever amount of reasons she's just not there. No. Instantly, your mind doesn't entertain and will say, oh, maybe it's a bad time for her. Maybe she's not in a good place. Instantly, you go to me. There's something wrong with me. She doesn't like me. I'm less of a man to her, or I'm not rich enough, or we're so quick to turn that mirror. And it's like, you'll be feeling emasculated for no reason. I comment offended. No one insulted you, but because, as you mentioned, your key was ego. So because your ego is bruised, you fear Uguti, just because you feel like you have been exposed, everyone can see Uguti, you are now vulnerable or you are less than a man. And so you go on the defense. For no apparent reason. Umuntu just said, no, I'm not interested in you, or now is not a good time, or whatever reason. And she doesn't even have to give a reason, but instantly a no or a form of rejection, because again, we have so many external locuses of identity. When these things that we revere, when they reject us, we feel we are being rejected as men. And so I'm less than a man. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not rich enough. When in a lot of these cases, it has absolutely nothing to do with you. God, you be the first to take that mirror and say, ingamlento, ungabe mina, urejecte mina, ulahla mina. And it's like, well, not necessarily, right, born.
So, you know, I'm going to go to a few causes that I thought of, you know, about why do we feel emasculated, but I got to realize, you know, sometimes we can inherently feel emasculated. Where even the most powerful of men go through that, right? Where they feel emasculated, even with all the things that we spoke about around emasculinity. You can have the car, the house, and yonkinto. There's a thin line between feeling occasionally emasculated and overly emasculated and being insecure. You know, so that exists. You know. So I think we need to be clear on that it happens. That's inherent. That's inherent. You know, it will happen at one point or the other. You know, that's why they're even in psychology, and some people are here psychologists. There are things that are the imposter syndrome, because that imposter syndrome can emasculate you because you feel less of of who you really are. So that in itself is a self-emasculation. So it's not so much always external, but what are the real reasons? I think you said sometimes we just feel emasculated. But I think that as guys, we all have a high expectation of ourselves, right? And in having these high expectations of ourselves, where we say real men should have all the answers. Real men should be winners. Real men should always have money. Real men should always lead. Inherently, we are giving ourselves that pressure, and without anyone saying anything to us, at the moment when we feel that we can't deliver on those things that we have imposed on ourselves, that we start feeling emasculated, even before anyone says it, So it's not always external. It can also come from within, which can be linked to our conversation of last week of being broken. It can be from many sources, but the result of it is emasculation in the context of our conversation today.
It's true, and it would be funny in a different world, but it isn't in ours. Ngoba we've seen and we're seeing the dangers of someone who feels emasculated. Ngoba, to connect it to our last week's conversation about being broken, when a broken individual feels emasculated, he's a danger because he doesn't have the language to articulate or understand ukuthi le feeling engizwayo is because of A, B, and C. So abantu besilisa, because we don't have the emotional not capacity, but the emotional intelligence or the language, when our feelings are hurt, rather than speaking and expressing what as in this made me feel A, B, and C, and I don't like this environment or whatever the case is. Instead of that, when we feel attacked or emasculated, it becomes dangerous, and but the only language we know is dominance. So when you feel like you've been disrespected or emasculated or insulted, more times than not, you would have a strong edge to get physical rather than to initiate a conversation, a dialogue. So it danger emasculation yet in ilapha. When you emasculate this kind of man who has this perspective, they won't have a conversation and explain ukuthi they don't like what happened and they Bazugli Maz, because that's the only language they know. That's the only language that reaffirms his idea of what a man is: strength. And if I can dominate you in nothing else, I will dominate you physically. And that results to I beat you up, I rape you, I kill you, I so and so. You know what I mean?
So Ndie, I agree with you 100%. And what Ulindi is saying here, the comments are just flowing here. She is saying what we said last week and what I said at the beginning of this conversation, that a lot of these things stem from our genesis or from our beginning, and even the way that we feel about certain things can also stem from there. So I agree with you. Lindy. And I also agree with everybody, I guess, who's speaking here. To say that we echoing the sentiments that we can sometimes also self-emasculate. But Umbuso, there's a comment that he put here, and I was not where he says that emasculation is not only linked to ego, and I agree with him, and those are the points that I am going to now, to say what are the other points that can lead to emasculation, because it's not only ego. I agree with you, Mbuso. I agree with you. I agree 100% with you. Unfortunately, the next one will somehow link to ego, but the others, I guess, will not link to that. The next one, I will say, when a man feels, and unfortunately, this is with the world changing and women being favored for more opportunities than men. When a man feels that a woman is better than him in a relationship, even when a woman says nothing, he can feel emasculated, and it then requires the woman to dumb herself down to accommodate this man, to make this man feel more powerful, etc. To make him feel good about himself, and one can say it's ego, one can say whatever it is that makes him feel that way. I can't say what is it that makes the man feel that way, but there are some men who feel emasculated when the woman is better than them, and without being able to accept that, So the other one, I'm just going to rush through these points, brother, because we have 7 minutes now to finish the conversation and to wrap. I know some people are saying let the conversation continue. I think next week maybe continue, but we'll see. You know, some ways of being emasculated are really unintended, where a person can draw a comparison, and in this case, where a woman, and I'm not attacking women in this case. Obviously, it stems from a man's past traumas, lack of assurance, self-appreciation, and validation, as Ndie puts it. You know, where when a woman will maybe see on TV, Lewis Hamilton. I like Lewis Hamilton, so he says, "Hey, this guy is excellent at what he does. He's at the top. You know, is at the top of this. He's at the top of this." And so you're thinking to myself, so what? She's never spoken about me like this. She's never spoken to me. She's never spoken to me like this. In fact, you know, and prepping me and doing all of these things, you know, and the one which I'm going to close off with, and I'll leave the last half of the 6 minutes to you, is the alpha female. You know, we spoke about the alpha male not being able to be an alpha male at all times. It's a conversation I had this afternoon with someone when we spoke about the alpha female. And say, what kind of man does the alpha female need? Because when an alpha female cannot get her way with the person that she is with, intrinsically the alpha female will then, the alpha female will then, because she's alpha, that's who she is, maybe unintendedly so, it can also lead to the emasculation of a man. You know, I've been through certain pains where it could have been an alpha female, or it was a woman who I can't define the partner that I was with, whether she was alpha or whatever she was, but where certain things were said which really took a lot from me, you know, as a man. And I felt I think I understand the feelings now better, that one was being emasculated with those things that were being said, you know. So just with those three points, you know, which are not conclusive, by the way, you know, they also add on to the stripping of the causing of the emasculation of men. I mean, Umbuso speaks about the emasculation of a boy child. That also happens. Being Hambena, Umbuso to Inkandla this past weekend. The boys, the young boys in the rural areas are spoken to as nothing, and all the boy wants is to grow up to be a man so that he can have the power. You know, so there are many areas. I mean, I acknowledge there are many areas where this emasculation can come. But we were just touching just about a few of them there, and I'm taking it back to you, my brother.
I agree with this, and my son, I think for just for clarity, I don't think we should, you know, obviously some individuals do, but generally I don't think we should condone or be subliminally pushing a message of women should walk on eggshells for men. I've never believed in that. I've never understood the underlay. I've never understood not even just men, just any human being. I've never understood biting your tongue just to protect someone's fragile identity or whatever. So in this context, no, I don't think women should walk on eggshells, and women should not. And unfortunately, we're in a space where women who are not and are speaking their truth and owning who they are faced with dangerous and toxic and broken individuals who don't have the language to carry or maintain leondoleo outside of physical abuse. Unfortunately, instead of being confronted with counterparts that will have a conversation, a real adult and mature, even stimulated conversation, we are faced with individuals who would rather stab you or choke you to death or rape you or molest you, and as a way of subduing you or putting you in your place or muting you. That's the unfortunate reality. But I don't think we should condone or be in an environment where anyone has to tiptoe ngoba ba protect the ego Ndie, ba protect the ego Nqobani. That I mean, any if you are anything, if you are a man, you are a man, regardless of how a woman behaves, whether she respects you or not. Windot. And when you understand and know yourself, that doesn't change, regardless of who says what, who moves how. You would remove yourself from a situation that you see is unworthy of your presence. But a woman speaking or doing any certain thing doesn't make you less of a man. You understand that when you have a solid a sense of identity. Ukuthi ubani uthini ubani wenzani akukuphuci ukuthi uyindoda wena uyazazi ukuthi mina ngiyindoda. Whether you see it or not is not my issue. That's on you. And so we're not coming from that place. We're coming from a place where if someone says, "Wena Nqobani awuyona indoda," you genuinely feel like you are less than a man, and you take that into your head, and so you arm up because now you will fight Ndie to prove that you are a man. So it's a very dangerous place we're in, and that's why we have to, one, have these conversations, and two, start living lezi zinto esiyikhulumayo, so that iy'ngane zethu uma zisibona ziyayibona indoda ekwazi ukukhuluma, ziyayibona indoda that can stand up for what he believes in without having to belittle or harm or disrespect any other person.
Ndie, I'm not going to take away from any of your words, because you have somehow summarized everything up in a way that in a better way than we could have. Those comments, Terence is giving you a target picture, to say you've hit it on the button, the bullseye. And also is, I mean, people are saying that we really should continue with these conversations, because we can't conclude them here. I mean, we have 54 seconds left. We can't conclude them here, and all that we're doing is just starting conversations that are needed and that should happen. We can't do everything with the limited time that we have. Perhaps the need for discussions like this are necessary now, because we are not against anything that women want. All we're saying is that we just want to build the new man, as the title of the series is called. The new man. We want to see things differently, and we want to do things differently. And next week, when we continue with the conversation, and for the next 3 weeks, that's the direction that we are going through, that we are going to, to say, where is this new man going to? Does this new man look like? Because to understand what you are saying, you need to be a different kind of breed to know that you can coexist as women. Like Uvuyo said, when did women move, according to the Bible, when do they move from just being complementary but to being competition and equals to men? Those are all the things. There's a lot of unlearning to be done. So those are my closing comments, Ndie, before this thing times us out like it did last week. You can close on your end, my brother.
Yeah. Could you guys address how men give respect, especially in the context of how important it is to respect for men? That would be another. It would take more time than that would mean another live. How men give respect. I think I think that's better. That would be better addressed next week, because
next week, I think it fits into next week's conversation. Yeah,
that plays closely to what we said we're going to be talking about next week.
Yeah,
and not to make this whole thing sound like it's formatted or structured, but yeah, to avoid repetitiveness, and because I do think we'll see these conversations. One, they need to be consistent on live and off live. We have to normalize them, and the way in which we live has to bear testimony to that. An hour is not enough, Masent. You're 100% right. I also dislike an hour. It's really not it, because we have so much to talk, and if we really want to fix anything, we have to do it consistently as Nairobi and dabble in. We've got 7 seconds left, so
bye-bye.